Hello, my name is Leslie Kane, and I am the host of the Why Not Today podcast. This is a podcast to celebrate people who have been courageous and said, Why not today? I started this podcast in honor of my father, Patrick Kane, who often did say, Why not today? I'm based in Reston, Virginia, a planned community right outside of Washington, D.C., and thanks for joining us today. And my guest today is somebody who was recommended, but I've known, and I can't believe we really haven't met before because there's a million connections. But today we have Steve Gurney, who is the director of Positive Aging Community. And so I would like to start with talk about connections and how we connect with people. And Steve, I've known from the Reston community. He was and still is big into paddle boarding and knew who he was and did a couple events when he was there. But recently I was talking to a friend of mine whose parents are going through some aging situations. She's like, you need to talk to Steve Gurney. And then when we looked and talked to each other, it's like we both grew up in the same town. We went to the same high school. And even after Steve, that we talked the other day, I mentioned you to my sister, and she was at another event, and your name came up, and she's like, how have I heard that name? So it's so funny how that's just all the connections. So
Small
welcome.
world.
Yes,
Small world. Yeah.
and Reston is a very small world. So welcome. We're excited to have you on and talking about aging. And I'm really trying to focus on subjects that people, my audience is kind of concerned with and happening in life. And we're all, the age group I'm surrounded with, and a lot of my listeners are kind of that sandwich generation. Our parents are getting older, we're getting older, in lots of different situations. So I thought you'd be a great resource. So before we get started, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and a fun fact that nobody would know.
Oh boy, geez. So first off, as you had mentioned, grew up in the Reston community and went away to school. And when I was in college, my grandfather needed to go to a nursing home, and I observed firsthand what my family had to go through when you have a life change like that. And it was surprising to me that there wasn't a guide that made it easier for folks to understand all the different options when you're being discharged from a hospital and somebody tells you got to go to a nursing home. What are the choices and where do you go and what have you? And so when I graduated, I put together a little guide. At the time, it was called Guide to Retirement Living. I didn't think I was starting a business. I just wanted something on my resume to help me get a better job. And here I am 33 years later.
Wow.
The publication that I publish is called the Positive Aging Sourcebook, and it lists all the different resources in the DC metro area, how much they cost, what's included in the cost, whether it be housing or aging in place or other resources. And I've been doing that for 33 years. I sold the business to the Washington Post, and I ran it under their ownership for over 20 years. And about 4 years ago, I bought it back, and I'm
Oh,
running it
wow.
on my own again. And the pandemic is really what sort of created the new platform that I have that is much more interactive, and therefore we've rebranded it the Positive Aging Community or the Pro Aging Community. And what happened is before the pandemic, I would host a lot of live and interactive events for senior living professionals that were in person. And when we couldn't meet in person, I moved our gatherings to online. And over the last few years, what's happened is that those online discussions on every topic on aging you could ever imagine have grown from just being professionals to now all of our discussions have older adults, their loved ones, and influential senior living professionals, and we talk about everything under the sun. But that hopefully that wasn't too long of an
That's okay. I want to talk about some of those things. But before we do that, what's a fun fact that people would know about Steve Gurney?
Well, I'm going to just jump right into it because the title of your podcast is "Why Not Today," and in my career, a real "Why Not Today" moment that I had was that I woke up one day and realized I was an expert in senior housing and in senior living, and I never spent the night in one of these communities. I'd interviewed hundreds of people. Visited over 500. I knew a lot about them. I helped a lot of people make the transition, but I'd never experienced what it's like to actually live in one of these communities. And it sort of struck me as it's like working in a restaurant, but not eating the food.
Right.
And so I'm 57 now. When I was 43, I moved in and I lived in 5 different senior living communities as a resident temporarily. But it really gave me a great perspective that I've been able to share with our community members, and given me a different perspective on the whole senior living industry in general.
Yeah, I bet. When you told me that the other day, I'm like, wow, that is definitely a why not today and a courageous thing to try. And that was, it wasn't like just one night, but you
Yeah.
really immersed yourself. That's
Well,
awesome.
you're doing something right when the people in the industry that work in these communities say things like "better you than me" or "why are you doing that?" And it's sort
Yeah,
of, and we can get into it a little bit later, but ideally the people that are creating and managing and working at these communities we should be working in communities that we'd want to live in ourselves. And
yeah,
so
totally.
we can get to that point.
Yeah, definitely want to talk about that. Before we do that, though, what's the definition of courage to you? What does courage mean?
Oh, courage. Geez. This is a good question. This is like a job interview kind of,
It is.
but, but I think, you know, I, I think courage is the ability, I mean, to 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 try something that is going to make you feel uncomfortable, and knowing that just by trying it, you're going to make some connections and you're going to be a better person going out the other side.
That's a great definition. I love the connection because I'm all about connections. And
Yeah, and I would say that the older we get, the more courage we get, because we've seen more. We've seen that, when you're a young kid and you're going into a room where you don't know anybody, how scary that can be, or the first day of school or what have you. But the older we get and the more life experience we have and the more examples of courage that we exhibit, and we see that life is actually better when you take those risks and
right.
move there, the better it is. And that's one of the benefits of having a multi-generational community, is that the stories of courage that our elders can share with us.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that, your definition and with the connections because I think that's, connections make a big difference. And that you're so right that, when we were younger, we were afraid, the things we did, they were going to be, you know, we're going to die or the boogeyman under the bed and
Yeah,
all those things. Like, why did we believe all that? And as you get older, you're like, oh, it's not going to be that bad. And it is better. Now, I think the younger generation where they have the advantage of courage is they're not afraid to play on a computer or a phone. Like, my mom is terrified that she's going to screw some up, and she has. But kids are like, I'll try it. What the heck? What do I have to lose?
yeah. But the whole concept of the Red Hat Society,
Hmm.
which is a group of predominantly older women who get together and they wear these crazy red hats and these outlandish outfits. And the whole premise of that is that, you know, when we were younger, we dressed the way that they wanted us, this, that, and the other. And now we're just out there, strutting our stuff. And I'm willing to bet that the women that are in that go to these events wearing the red hats and things like that, if you asked them to do that in their 20s or 30s, no way, I'm not going to do that. But the whole, I think that whole club was sort of formed on courage and having courage together and being with a community.
I've
So
never thought about that group, but that's a great group that represents courage. I need to find somebody to interview. I know they have like the younger group of that is the Purple Hat group.
the Purple Hat Group, oh geez,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but I did, obviously know more senior people, and I did get more involved in the senior community teaching water aerobics for 13 years. And there's so many things I learned in a pool with these older adults. So many things I could share. So I love your business and what you're doing and helping. And I love the community. And I think that's the one thing my friend Leanne, when she's like, you need to talk about Steve, is that I am all about connection and community and come by it naturally as my dad was a city planner and was all about community and his company was community development and so many things in aging. So I know you've done a lot of other things in your life, courageous, but let's talk about the aging world and what are some of the things that I think, it does take courage to face things we don't know. And there's so many things we don't know in the aging. And I think a lot of people are kind of afraid to look at it. So talk to me about some of the things that you've learned, or I know we talked about a couple different subjects before we came on.
Yeah.
Um, about things that people need
Well,
courage to do, and really they're not that bad. That you just need to say why not today and do it.
yeah, exactly. And I would say that the first thing in terms of why not today is to have conversations about your future. And this, like, you should be doing this through the entire lifespan. Is that, is talking with your circle of friends and family about, you know the future and the next chapters in your life. But as we grow older, and we're all growing older, and this is the whole thing, we use aging the wrong way. Aging starts on the delivery room table.
Yeah.
It doesn't start with an AARP card.
No.
Everybody is aging at the exact same rate who's
Right.
alive, who's lucky enough to be alive. And we need to remind ourselves of that. But as we grow older, there are some things that there's no crystal ball, there's no guarantee anything is going to happen to us. But, there's a better chance that your mobility might be compromised. There's a potential chance that you could, develop things like dementia and Alzheimer's. The older you get, the higher the percentage it goes.
Right.
And no matter, and none of us have a crystal ball. So having conversations in advance is the first thing. That is why not today. Now, I mentioned we have these weekly discussions on in my community, and our number one topic is the topic of solo aging. Okay, and solo aging, I love this discussion topic because it's a conversation that we can all have. Now, a lot of times when people hear the term solo aging, they instantly think about, somebody who never married and doesn't have any family around. That's a solo ager.
Right.
And yeah, that is probably a definition of a solo ager. And most people in this category are very empowered because they recognize that they don't have a safety net, that I've got to plan, I've got to think about what happens if I have, a surgery, who's going to bring me home from the house and how am I going to be taken care of and things like that. And most people who define themselves as solo agers are in that bucket. But what I love doing is going to a barbecue or something like that, and the topic of solo aging pops up and somebody looks at me kind of funny, and I was like, hey, not something that you really need to worry about. And they're like, well, yeah, and I've got 3 kids. It's like, okay, let me ask you something. What are the chances that you and your partner are going to pass away at the same time? Well, that's probably not going to happen. So one of you is going to outlive the other. And then those 3 kids, do you really want them taking care of you if something happened? Well, no. And so put it down to our turn of like, yeah, say the people around you on what would happen if I was by myself in the future and who could I turn to. It's very important because if something happens and you haven't had those conversations, usually you're going to be, disrupting somebody's life. And none of us really want to do that. So,
Yeah. My mom's in a situation with a neighbor who is younger than my mother, has dementia, and isn't married. She's divorced. Her family's not close physically, not necessarily, they weren't really that close at all. And my mother and another neighbor are taking care of this woman who's got dementia. I'm like, we need to get other resources. So yeah. So as far as your community and people, your discussions, is that open to anybody? It's a subscription.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you just go to the website proaging.com, that's probably the easiest way to get there. You'll see recordings of over 300 discussions that we've had and
Oh wow.
podcasts. And then you'll also see the schedule of what we've got coming up. And, I think that the live and interactive nature of our discussions is what makes them a lot of fun and very interesting, and also a great resource to get questions answered and make connections that can solve the things that you're thinking about today. And we welcome any and all to join in. And we have so many of these things. It's sort of like there's probably one that you might find interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I will definitely link your information in the show notes of all the discussions because I have so many friends that are having that situation. Like I never thought you hear about it, but you never thought you'd be in
Well,
that situation of
yeah,
aging parents and your own aging and
the shifting of the demographic is occurring, and there's lots of positive things about that. Excuse me. And there's lots of challenging things about that. We're going to have more people over the age of 65 than we've ever had in history. We've got workplace shortages, and some of the positive things is technology is developing. But one of the things that you had just mentioned there is that a lot of my friends are going through this with their parents, and what that is doing is that's essentially training for our future elders.
right,
And because so many people basically say, I never knew this stuff existed. I never knew how expensive it is. I never knew that this was going to take this much work. And now that they're experiencing that firsthand, hopefully I hear this on a regular basis is I'm going to take steps so that my kids don't have to go through this, or I'm going to take steps so that since I'm by myself, that I've got a network that can help me if something happens.
right. So yeah, let's talk about that. So somebody that's like, all right, I need to prepare. They're going to be proactive. And what what are your resources? What are the resources people how can we get educated and be courageous to say why not today now
Yeah.
instead of when we're in crisis, which really usually was what happens. Like I am blessed. I'm one of six kids. So my dad had some health issues and had a stroke and then did pass away. But there were six of us. Well, five because one of my siblings has Down syndrome, so she wasn't a big player in it. But we all kind of fell in our roles of who did what and had resources, but I've got friends that are only children, and I'm like, how the heck do you do that?
Well, I mean, Leslie, you're really fortunate to have a tight knit family that communicates, because a lot of
Yeah,
times the only child has it a lot easier than six varying opinions of what should happen.
you can't say
There's,
everything's always smooth, but we do pretty much fall in our roles of
yeah,
like, I have
no,
one brother that will quiz a doctor till he's blue in the face. The doctor tells me something like, okay. Brian's like, well, why didn't you ask this? Why didn't you? I'm like, I don't know. That's your job.
yep.
So how do we
So
get ahead of this? And what do we
yeah,
do to
so
prepare?
number one is to familiarize yourself with, the resources that are out there, and that folks can get the Positive Aging Source Book to just kind of see the different resources that are available, or just go to proaging.com. But I
Is
think
that a free book you get? Is
it's
it
free,
paid for? Okay.
free of charge, and but I think the most important thing is to have conversations about these types of decisions that might happen, and they might not happen too. But one of the easiest ways to do this is, like you have just had, you shared a story about a neighbor that has Alzheimer's, and no real family caregivers, is, talking to your circle of friends and your network of support and your kids and your best friend about, hey, I've got this neighbor who has dementia, and there's no caregivers there. Do you ever think about what you would do if you had dementia and just have a conversation about it? Um, the it's very hard because we feel like it's like having a conversation about death and dying. It's hard to have that because we feel like, oh wow, I don't want to talk about that, you
Right.
know. Well, I mean, if you don't talk about it, then your support network doesn't know what your wishes are if you are reaching end of life. And the I while I while these are difficult conversations to have, I feel that the conversations that I have on this topic, and I have so many these days, are some of the most deep and meaningful and thought-provoking conversations that I'm a part of. And so it really is one of these why not today is that, just have a conversation with your family, let them know what you want. Now, I'm going to give your listeners kind of one sort of word of wisdom here is that oftentimes these conversations, when you talk about, let's say that you're talking with a parent or loved one about a neighbor that moved to a senior living community, a lot of times what somebody will say is, oh, don't ever take me to one of those places. I don't
Right.
want to go to one of those places. That's an opportunity to sort of, hey, why don't we go have lunch and visit our friend who's there at that place? And because I'm a little concerned that, you know, that you're digging your heels in, what if you were lonely and isolated and all alone at home? What if your home was no longer safe? And opening that door, because I can tell you there are so many adult children that I talk to that basically mom said she never wanted to go to one of those places, and now they're moving heaven and earth to meet that wish, and it's not necessarily the healthiest setup for
Right.
the individual.
And I know through your services you provide, you give suggestions of good facilities
Well, what we
and what
list
works.
them all. Yeah. So and that's, we could do a whole nother hour, but I'll sort of amend it is that, there's no best place out there. Okay. But here's some tips on how to find the best place for your mom and dad or yourself is that number one, um, be, having you or your loved ones be part of the community. It's similar to going to school. When you drop your kid off at school, you don't just drop them off and
Right.
you're on your way. You join the PTA, you get to know the teachers, you become part of that community. And so that's the best thing that you need to do if your loved one is thinking about making a move. And so the best one of the things is try to find a place that's easy to visit so you can pop in and you can be part of the community. The second thing that I tell people is that I want you to pretend that you're not shopping for an old folks home,
Mhm.
but you're looking for the next college that you're going to.
Oh,
And
that's
when college
fun.
kids go on campuses, they don't care about the square footage of their dorm room. They look at the other students, and that's what you want to do when you look at these places is that you want to look at the other residents, you want to look at the faculty or the staff. And I just remind people, it's great if you find a beautiful place with wonderful walls, but it's not about the walls, it's the people working and living within those walls.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had many instances where my father was in rehab, senior facilities, different situations, and they aren't all good. And there are definitely some good and some great people we worked with, but then there were some not so good. And I think there's a whole nother subject of how to educate families how to navigate through these systems and know the right questions to ask and who to talk to,
Yep.
and not just take. I mean, I could tell story after story of crazy adventures. Probably the funniest story of my dad is, just to share one of his antics, is he was in the hospital and he had had a stroke, so he had left neglect. So when he ate, he had a hard time seeing the left side of the plate. His left arm didn't really work, so he was in the hospital for something else at Reston Hospital. And the nurse brought us food, and he couldn't find the fork, whatever. He couldn't find the nursing thing to call the nurse. He couldn't figure out where it was. So he got a call from a politician on his cell phone asking to the politician for him, my dad, to vote for him. He goes, tell you what, if you call the nursing station on such and such a floor, Reston Hospital, and send a nurse to my room to help me eat my breakfast, I'll vote for you. And they did. And he
Oh,
wrote in the
wow.
local paper about it. So he
That's
was
one of the
definitely,
best stories I've heard. That is
yeah,
great.
there was a story in the local Reston paper about it, thanking the person. But, he was definitely a find a way kind of guy. And sometimes you have to do that. So,
Absolutely. And that's really, I mean, my advice to folks is you got to be the squeaky wheel. You got to be present in the community. And
oh,
one
yeah.
of the things, I mean, the benefit that your dad had with 6 kids, and, I can only imagine when he was in the hospital or in other settings, the stream of visitors that he
Oh,
had. And
nonstop.
it's kind of, the other term that used to be used, not solo aging, it was elder orphans. And I it's such a sad term, but a visit to any nursing home, you will see there are residents in there that don't have any visitors,
Oh,
and
no, it's
it's
terrible.
really sad because it's they're relying on different people to advocate for them other than their loved ones.
Yeah. I do a program through Mary Kay where we do an adoptive mom or adoptive grandparent providing gifts, and we've taken gifts to the nursing homes and facilities. And there's some people, yeah, that never have visitors.
No,
Um,
they they've out a lot of people have outlived their whole family,
yeah,
okay? And then there's folks that maybe they never married and had a family, and their remaining family members are as old as they are, and they're all over the country.
yeah.
It really is tough, and we need to support these folks.
Yeah,
It's
and we need to build
great.
community and be there. And I know my water class was a tight knit community. People knew we had an email list of people that were sick or something happened or we were there for them. So I think a big message here is, to build those relationships, those communities, have those discussions. I was thinking when you were talking about those questions, those games you can get now, I don't, like Cards Against Humanity. You ask all these questions. We need an aging question game, like to ask those hard questions. Maybe with a couple drinks in you,
Oh
you're
no,
gonna have
they've
some
got
answers.
those.
Oh, do they?
And no, they've got those because there's a big movement for advanced directives, meaning like the whole conversation about when would you want us to pull feeding tubes and things of that
Mm-hmm.
nature. And it is there are some really creative games out there. I'll send you a link and you can throw it
Okay,
in with
kind of
the
fun. Yeah, so we'll definitely share your contact information because I think it's a great subject that we need to talk about more. And that's one of the reasons I wanted you on here and to be able to share some of your content, which I'm hoping to do on the website because it's a subject we all need to talk about it.
it really
So
is.
yeah, so what courage would you, or what would you say to somebody to empower somebody to be courageous?
Oh man. Well, I got 2 kids, and these are a lot of the conversations that you have with your children are centered around this topic, whether we frame it that way or not. You know, I think that it's taking a risk and taking a chance, um, as long as it's healthy and it's something that is not harming
You froze.
anybody, and it's way. Oh wow, okay. It's like
Okay, I got it. Give it a
having the
chance
courage.
as long as
Yeah.
it's healthy, and then you froze.
Okay. I think when you frame it that way, and this is off the top of my head, but it's sort of like when we take risks and we prepare for them properly, it's like we're entering a secret passageway, and when we go through that passageway, we're going to be a different person, and we're going to have a new experience that can help us be a better person. and help us share, better share life experience with others.
All right, I love that definition. I think that's going to be my new tagline. I love that. Um, yeah, that, and I've had lots of discussions, obviously, around the courage and doing those things, and they don't have to be big. They're just those little things. And I've even listened to a podcast the other day. It was about decluttering and organizing that are totally different. But the subject, the way she turned it around, which I've shared this many times, is like when you're decluttering, it's like just doing that one thing, you're leaving a situation better. And
Yeah.
so just doing that little thing that making you better and being courageous, and just those little steps give you courage to do the next thing and the next thing. And
And yeah, I think he was quoting somebody else, but my good friend Len Forkas, who I'm going to introduce you to, who's climbing Mount Everest right now,
that's
by the way.
awesome.
But but he shared a statement with me from somebody, and it's action creates opportunity. Is that you know, when we sort of say something like, oh, I'm not ready yet, or I'm not going to do this, or what have you, or I'm scared, you're missing an opportunity. You always want to be in action, and we always want to be improving ourselves, because we improve the world when we improve ourselves.
Yes, love that. Thank you. Yeah, we could talk forever and ever, but we don't want to keep you
No,
clear.
this is
So
great.
I always at the end kind of tie back to connecting to my dad. And people are like, well, I didn't know your dad.
Yeah.
And you probably ran into my dad at somewhere around
I
the
definitely
world.
remember
Um,
him,
yeah,
and but I didn't realize that all those years that I was paddleboarding there on Lake Ann, I was basically paddling right in front of his house.
yes. So yeah, so all the connections you're talking about. First of all, community. He was all about community. Um, you being on the lake and paddleboarding. He We lived on the lake and he worked at Lake Ann. So there weren't paddle boards in the day, but he went he ice skated, he swam, he sailed, he windsurfed, canoed, whatever way he made it to work at some point. And then the other thing you said you did, which is your snowboarding instructing,
Yeah.
and you work with people with disabilities or adaptive.
Hmm.
Um, so my dad, after he had a stroke, and remember, he had an eye patch on since high school, so he didn't have one eye, and then he had a stroke. But we went
Well,
up.
that's another thing. I'm legally blind in one eye. I've
Oh,
been that
really?
way since birth. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he was too, but he had an eye patch. Um, but we went to Blue Knob one time, and they had the adaptive ski patrol people taking him out on the slope, and he went, and it was so cold. I don't know if you've ever skied at Blue Knob; it's freezing. And he came back, and his mustache was frozen, like solid. He was frozen, but the smile on his face and the joy that he's like, I got to go skiing. And even
Yeah.
after his stroke, he still went body surfing. He got a PVC pipe and we did put a safety vest, a life jacket on him, which normally he wouldn't wear. But he went, he did it all when he was
Yeah.
older. You never knew.
Why not today? Yeah.
Why not today? Exactly. Well, Steve, thank you so much. This has been awesome. And we're going to share the resources. I'm going to have you share links to how to get in touch with you
Absolutely.
with the show notes. And we will have more discussions, I'm sure. And thanks again. And I'm looking forward to maybe we'll physically meet sometime for coffee or something, or see you on
I
the
love it.
plaza somewhere, because I'm always around Reston. Oh, and
I
back
love it.
to other connection, your son, I think we mentioned, he
Yep.
was
Yep.
working at FedEx, and
Yeah.
he said one day his name or you, and I'm like, I know who your dad is. Never really met him, but small little world. He was a
I
great kid
love it.
too.
I love what you're doing too, and
Oh,
the
well, thank
concept
you.
of this podcast is wonderful.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, thanks again, and thanks everybody for watching. You can always check out the podcast we're on all the sources, StreamYard. Now we're on YouTube. You can see a YouTube, iTunes, Google. We do have a website, whynotsaypodcast.com, and we do have gear and swag if you want a T-shirt or a cup or a vinyl. I was thinking the other day too, we might need some journals to journal those brave, courageous things we're doing. So we're looking to do some fun things and collaborate with other people. So thanks again for watching, and thanks, Steve, for joining us. And don't forget, say, why not today?